Alright, we're going to look at another example. Now here, we're not given an actual visual, so it may be helpful to just jot down where the line would be. So negative 3, 3. So I'll go negative 3 here, and then up 3. Point would be somewhere in here, and then 6, negative 3. So go over 6, down 3, and then just kind of connect the line. Okay, and so it says 2 to 1. Now, 2 to 1, remember that, alright, so we're dividing it up. We're having 3 parts total. This is R, we'll say this is S. Okay, and then so 2 to 3, so from here to here, it's about somewhere in there is a point that we're looking for. So this would be 2 parts, and this would be 1 part for a total of 3 parts. So we got a third of the line would be here, 2/3 of the line would be here, because again there's 3 parts total. Okay, so we can come up with that just by adding these together. Alright, so that's 3 parts total. Now what we need to do here is come up with the change in X and the change in Y. So we'll start out, I'll just go from R. Okay, so from R, so we're going to do the changes. So change in X. So it's going to be X2 minus X1. Alright, so X2 would be 6 minus X1, which would be negative 3. Okay, so we're going to end up adding, and we get 9. So if we went, the total change in X is 9. So let's do the same thing for Y. So it'll be Y2 minus Y1. So Y1 would be Y2 would be negative 3 minus Y1, which was 3. Okay, be careful with that. This is not 0. This is negative 6. Okay, now what we're going to do is take that and multiply it times the fraction part, or the percentage, however you want to look at it, of the line that we have. So let's go 2/3. So let's multiply this by 2/3 and this by 2/3. Okay, so when we do this, when we end up with 18 over 3, okay, so we end up with 6 here. Okay, and then here we'll end up with negative 12 over 3, so we end up with negative 4. And then we'll take this and add or combine it to this value. So we go negative 3 plus 6, and then we have 3 minus 4. Okay, so our point here is going to be 3, negative 1. So we should have went over 3 and down negative 1, somewhere in there. Alright, now, so that's if we came from R. Now let's say if we came from S. Now what would be the difference then? Okay, so I'm going to clean this up and then start that part. Alright, so now this time we're coming up from S. But so the only thing that really changes is it's going to end up changing the signs of our X change and our Y change, but X's. So now we would say X2 minus X1. So we're coming up from here, so this is now X1. So we'll take 6 minus negative 3. So we end up with negative 9. Okay, and then the Y's. Okay, this would be Y1. This would be Y2. So it's going to be 3 minus negative 3. So it's going to be plus 6. Okay, now we're a third of a way if we're going up from S. So we'll multiply this by a third and this by a third. Okay, so we end up with negative 9 over 3. That reduces to negative 6. Sorry, negative 3. And then we would get 6 over 3 here, and this reduces to 2. Okay, and so now we'll simply combine this. So it'll be 6 minus 3 for our X value, and then it'll be negative 3 plus 2. So we end up with 6 minus 3 gives us 3. Negative 3 plus 2 gives us negative 1, and so that's our point. Now when you're doing these problems, you don't have to do them twice. I'm just showing you that as long as you use the right fraction or the percentage of the line that you have, you will end up should end up with the same answer. Alright, so let's go ahead and do one more example. Now again, I think it helps if you kind of plot them, but you don't have to. Actually, I'll do it without plotting this time. Here we have 3 to 7. Now there's a total of 10 parts. So from R to S, the point that we're looking at is going to be 3/10 of the line will be made up by that. And then for this part would be 7/10 if we were coming from here. Alright, so let's do the change in X and then the change in Y. Alright, so I'm going to go X2 minus X1. So if I'm coming from -2, 4 to this one, okay, this is going to be X1, this is going to be, it's going to be X2. So let's go 18 minus -2. So we're going to end up adding, so we get 20. Okay, then the Y's, we'll take the -6 and add, subtract -4 from it, so we end up with -10. Okay, then we'll simply take the 3/10. Now this will reduce out for us pretty good as well. So, alright, so anyway, we end up with 20 times 3, which is actually be 60 divided by 10, so we end up with 6. And we're going to end up with, the 10s would cancel out, and we end up with -3 for this. So now what we would do is say -2 plus 6, okay, for the X value, and then -4 minus 3. So our point should be at 4, +1. Okay, and so that's how we would come up with that point if we were coming from the R. Now let's come from the S and see that we get the same answer. Alright, so now we're coming from S. So it'll switch the X2 and X1. Alright, so now since we're coming from S going to R, alright, so this would now be X1, and this would be X2. Sorry, this is X2, and this is X2, this is Y2, this is X1, this is Y1 now. Alright, so we'll take -2, subtract 18 from it, and we get -20. Okay, so these numbers shouldn't change. Okay, then we'll take -6, except for the sign, -6, and subtract 4 from it, and we get -10. And now we'll take the 7/10 and multiply it. Okay, so now for this one we're going to end up with, this will reduce, but we would end up with -140 over 10, so we'd end up with -14. Here the 10s would cancel out, and we'd end up with -7. Okay, so now to prove the point that we should end up with the same point, what we'll do is combine this to the 18. So we go 18, okay, minus 14 for our X value, and then we'll do the Y value of -6, okay, minus -7. Okay, so we'll combine those and we get 4, and then combine -6 and 7 and we get 1. So 4, 1 should be our answer. Now, which should compare to what we had before.